Hello, guys, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Hipfire Podcast. Today, we'll be doing a quick recap of what we saw last weekend with the first weekend of champs, and then we'll get into our predictions and kind of map breakdowns for what we expect to see this upcoming weekend. So, obviously, this past weekend was pretty hype, a lot of insane moments. Of course, it didn't start out the best, with all the hitting offline and, the people lagging all over the place, and obviously the forced to use pre-recorded gameplay, which it's still hype, it's still fun. The leaks did suck at first, but those got fixed. But yeah, what did you make of the early kind of mistakes by the CDL? Yes.
Um, it's hard to say. They had roughly a month to prepare for this event, obviously knowing it was going to be online and what problems they had in the past with players at times, getting booted offline or whether the internet connection wasn't great. So this was something to be expected. Uh, on one hand, it sucks to see. Wish they could have done something differently. But at the same time, they took swift action to get pre-recorded matches, which I think was the right solution. And as a result, we saw throughout the weekend players weren't getting hit offline once they went to pre-recorded. Although it did create this kind of weird atmosphere where like you knew matches weren't live and players already knew the result. But yeah, it was just kind of weird atmosphere for sure.
Yeah, definitely weird. And one thing that was especially weird was we saw the return of King Scump, I'm going to call it. He played amazingly, probably the best he's played all year. And it's funny because we always talk about certain players being quote unquote champs players, and I don't think we've really attributed that to Scump in the past. I mean, he's had some good performances for sure, but there've also been some letdowns in the mix as well. But he's really playing well. I don't know if it's different connection improvements or what it is, or if it's just he's just frying. I think personally, I think it's just a confidence thing for him. I think it's been a thing all year where he'll have a good map or two, but then he'll have one bad map and it kind of gets shut down. But this time it seems like even if he has a bit of a slow map, he seems to pick it up in the next one. So it could be trusted teammates or whatever it is, but it's working. He's playing great. Obviously, memeing Slasher in the corner there a little bit because that last match was
Yeah.
just insane. But what do you make of Scump's kind of surgence right
I
now?
mean, we've said it in the past. It was almost becoming a theme now. Scump showing up at champs. We saw it during Black Ops 4. He had a great Vegas event, one of the best players
That's
at that
true.
event, and sort of he either had a really poor event or was like mediocre slash average. And then at champs, he was back to that one that we expect of him, and sort of the same this season. Average, doing what he needs to do, but at this event, he definitely raised the bar. I mean, just to give you stats, he had a 1.09 thus far this weekend. uh, I think the biggest standout is his S&D play. He had a 1.29 in S&D, which was massive.
Damn.
He won 83.3% of these opening duels. He was 5-1 in opening duels, so he was always winning his ones, which you can't say for every player on that team or every player even in the league right now. So for him to be playing at that level, especially in SD, which is a game mode that historically hasn't been their greatest, is just something tons of fans are happy to see, and fans of Scumper should definitely be proud of.
Yeah, it seems like their hard work has definitely paid off, and that's nice to see.
Hmm.
That phase series, if they had clutched that
Right.
map five. But moving on, we saw early on. I just want to quickly mention Optics Run because commiserations they don't make it out, but man was that a fun, entertaining run they went on, and it all started because of this dude Bruce. Bruce gets the opportunity. Kenny keeps getting hit offline because some losers still have anything else better to do with their lives. So they call up Dashi, and he performs. Went off on that S&D, sniping over on B on Piccadilly. Looked great doing it. I loved seeing that. And then I don't have the clip right now, but he tweeted out that the cigar.
The,
So if you know that tweet, you know what I'm talking
the Joe
about.
Burrow cigar tweet, yeah.
Yeah, Joe Burrow's cigar. Yeah, so cold. Love that. So hopefully we see him play next year. And then obviously because of the issues they had, we then got to see Texas Kenny, whole other kind of Kenny. Just all of a sudden started playing super well, and to me it's a little bit worrying because as Slasher mentioned this on Twitter too. I don't know how much connection played a role now. It's hard to say because he looked really good on a better connection. So I wonder, if they played there the whole year, would they have played better? It's tough to say,
Mhm.
and it's annoying that circumstances are the way that they are because they maybe wouldn't have had to start all the way in losers. But yeah, pretty crazy run by Optic. But some other teams also made pretty crazy moves. So yeah, so what do you think about Ravens before we get into the predictions?
The Ravens were not necessarily a team I was expecting to go far. In terms of the teams that expected to upset, I figured the Ultra would be a team like that, maybe a team like New York, a team like Florida. So London was pretty down there. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I mean, they had flashes of brilliance here and there. Obviously, the event they came second, but I really wasn't expecting much out of them. Maybe top six at best. But they definitely surprised me.
Yeah, they shocked me as well. What shocked me was the New York match because we talked about it before on a previous podcast, but attached to me and to Yas as well, he seemed like one of the better players in this game. Like we had the stat guru, well, one of the stats gurus, Carson, come on and talk about how he found attached to a lot of the higher end of most of the stat lists, and he played fine. Like he had a good weekend. It's just like little mistakes they kept making, and it was just every map against the Ravens, and they kept making mistakes, and the Ravens would pounce on them. So good job for the Ravens. But yeah, I just wanted to mention New York there because personally, I feel like Florida got hot in the wrong part of the year, but New York still had it, and I thought New York should have been that fourth team, but Ravens showed up. New York made mistakes, and for a team that's well coached like New York and has like accuracy as a leader, to make those kind of mistakes and like rotation mistakes and hitting bomb sites where you don't clear out the whole bomb site, it's just a little bit. I don't want to say like I don't be too hard on them because I was hard on them early in the year as well, and then they won, but it's not really what I expected. I did expect more.
Mhm.
But yeah, with that being said, let's get on to our predictions because we have some pretty detailed breakdowns here.
All right.
So first, we're going to start with Yass and the Huntsman versus the Ravens.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting matchup. Obviously, as you see the graphic on the screen, the Scump, or the King rather, not the Scump, the King trying to reclaim his throne, whereas you see the EU lads trying to do what has never been done before, which is win champs. I mean, the last event EU even won was back in IW, so for them to win in itself would be kind of crazy, unless you count Toronto's win as an EU win, but uh, that's a different topic. Going into this matchup, I mean, it's pretty cut and clear. They played three times before. Uh, each time Chicago won 3-1, and they looked pretty comfortable in every single series. Looking at the individual players and how their champs have gone, I mean, on Chicago, Scump, obviously we talked about it earlier, is really impressed. His average KD over the season was a .99, and he had a 1.09 overall. Uh, and other players to note, besides Scump, almost every other player on the Huntsman actually had statistically a worse overall KD than compared to what they had during the season. The biggest notable drop offs are obviously Pristini, went from a .91 to a .78, but one that isn't talked about enough. I feel like people always harp on, oh, Pristini's not playing well, Pristini's not playing well. Alec dropped from a 1.08 to a .91 this weekend. From a player of that caliber, you should expect more of. Now, I'm not saying you should go turn all that hate at Brasini and send it straight to Alec, but I'm saying both brothers definitely had poor weekends, and they should be very fortunate to be in the position that they are in right now for a chance at top three. On the London side, we saw a couple other players also step their game up. We saw Zero go from a .92 to a 1.07. They get a 1.4 in S&D as well. So
Wow, damn.
quite the turnaround. Waskin actually dropped off quite a lot. He went from a 1.24 during the season to a 1.01. So quite the drop off. Thankfully, Zero cushioned that push. Another massive jump was Shawnee, another player to highlight on the London Royal Ravens. Went from a .87 to a 1.01. So quite the leap. And then both Dylan and Scraps, they faltered a little bit. But overall, I think with Zero and Shawnee really leading the way for London, and that's what we'll need if London is indeed to win the series. But let's move down into the previous matchups. We look at the Chicago event. Again, a 3-1, as I mentioned. Chicago won the hard points, but lost the Dom. Seattle event. London won the S&D, but lost all the respawns, and which was in the grand finals, that is. And then the most recent event, which is New York. London won the first hard point, I believe, which was Gunrunner, but then proceeded to lose the other three maps. the Dom, S&D, and Hardpoint. So London hasn't even been able to beat Chicago at a specific game mode. So that in itself is a bit difficult. But let's go into the map vetoes, starting with Hardpoint. So with regards to, before I touch on that, one player that I think stands out in the series is Arcides. Statistically, he's been dropping 1.3s and 1.14s against the Royal Ravens, so it'll be interesting to see if that he keeps it up. But moving on to the hardpoint map vetoes, so it's a clear advantage for the Chicago Huntsmen. You know, they've been noted as arguably the best hardpoint team throughout this entirety of the game, and reason, and there's a lot of reason for it. They have a very deep map pool. Now, London, one map that they struggle on historically is Ramaza Hardpoint. They're 2-6, and they've lost in Ramaza specifically to Chicago on that map. Thus, their second worst map, London's second worst map, that is Hackney, which is 4-7, uh, will most likely be picked by Chicago, as I expect London to ban Ramaza. As a result, Chicago will pick Hackney, as Chicago 7-5 on Hackney Yard, and also they've beaten London on it twice on two separate occasions. So I expect Hackney Hardpoint to be in the rotation. As for what the second hardpoint will be, that's a bit different. It depends on what the Chicago wants to be smart. If Chicago's smart, they're going to ban a map like Gunrunner. And the reason I say that is London on Gunrunner is 8-3. Chicago on Gunrunner is 7-7. So Chicago's got a lot of reps on it, but London seem to get that map a lot better, and they have a lot more success on that map. So if I'm Chicago, I ban Gunrunner, and I force London to pick either St. Petrograd or Azir Cave Hardpoint. And you look at those maps for London, St. Petrograd, they're 3-3, so not great. Whereas Chicago is 5-2. Oh, and then you look at Azir Cave, London 6-4, pretty solid. But then you look at Chicago and they're 8-1. They've lost it once. So if Chicago plays it smart and they ban Gunrunner Hardpoint, they essentially make it so that London has to choose between playing a map that they don't play a lot, which is St. Petrograd, or play a map in Azir Cave that Huntsmen are nearly undefeated on. So if they play it right, I'd expect London to pick St. Petrograd, meaning that the two hardpoints will be St. Petrograd and Hackney Hardpoint. But let's move on to the Dom. As we saw in the hardpoints was advantage to Chicago, and then for the Dom, it gets a little more tricky. As for the Dom, it most likely will might be Hackney. Huntsmen are 5-1 on Gunrunner, whereas London's 2-7. So I expect London to ban Gunrunner. I'd be surprised if they played it, especially considering they are a very weak Dom team in general. London are 3-6 on Hackney, again not great. When it comes to St. Petrograd Dom, Chicago is 4-2 and London's 4-4. So we could see a St. Petro Dom that is definitely within the cards. But for London, I think they have to ban Gunrunner, and it comes down to which Chicago wants to play more, whether it be Hackney or St. Petro. And I believe London has actually beaten Chicago on St. Petrograd Dom before. So if I'm Chicago, I'm making sure that it's a Hackney Dom because I know London's not very strong in it and that you can beat them in it. Thus, I expect Hackney Dom to be in the rotation. And then we go down into S&Ds.
I was just gonna jump quickly into that conversation there for Dom though.
Mhm.
I actually like agree with that pick because I remember Pristini on that map, map mode specifically, is really comfortable. I think if you're the Huntsman, you want Pristini to be the most comfortable on a map as he possibly can.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's a good pick. Like you know, Pristini likes the map, he plays well on it, so you should definitely pick that instead of Petro. But yeah, good point. Yeah, moving on to the search now.
Yeah, no, it was a very valid point. I remember that at that clip, Pristini, I think, had 10 straight kills. Pretty insane.
Yep, yep.
So you look at the respawns, and they favor the Huntsman heavily. And S&D is where the one area I'd expect London to get some leeway, and it sort of plays out here. So London, from my perspective, will almost certainly ban St. Petrograd, given that they are 1-4 on that map, and Chicago is 6-1. I, unless they've been practicing it, I don't think they'll play it. So London instantly bans St. Petrograd. As for Chicago, it'll be interesting to see what they ban. They could play it safe and ban Ramaza, which they're 2-4 on. However, London have only played it twice. They're 1-1 on Ramaza. So if they wanted to, they could, float that map. Maybe they ban it, but that we'll come back to that. That's a definitely map they can float. Both teams do like Gunrunner. Huntsmen are 8-3, and London is 6-4. Chicago has also beaten London on Gunner, to note. And then you look at Arklov Peak, a different map. Chicago's 4-4, London's 7-4. London has also beat Chicago on Arklov Peak S&D before, and they've looked strong throughout the weekend. And although I know we just saw the Huntsman clutch up round 11 against Optic on Arklov Peak, I don't know if it'd be the smartest thing to choose an Arklov Peak against a team like London. So if I were to guess, I'd expect Gunrunner potentially to make it in, and I'd expect Piccadilly to make it in. If Chicago is smart, I think they ban Arklov Peak. I put Arklov Peak there because I think it's a team that map that both like to play. But if in all honesty, I think if Chicago is smart, they float Ramaza because I don't think London will pick it, and they ban Arklov Peak. That way, they're guaranteed. I'd expect London to pick Piccadilly because it's a map that they're strong on. Piccadilly wise, London, I believe, is three. I believe they would pick, or Chicago should pick Piccadilly. They're 3-3, and I expect London, that is, to pick a different map. This case being Gunrunner. In that case, it gives an advantage to both teams. But I think if Chicago is smart, they float their Ramaza. I don't think that London will pick it. So the one area that I think London will have the advantage in will be the S&Ds. So I think they end up getting a Piccadilly S&D because they have lost to Chicago on it before, but I think they'll have the advantage this time. And I think if you're Chicago, I think you end up picking a Gunrunner S&D. I think it's a map that both are very comfortable on, both have succeeded on, and I think for the Huntsmen, they'll be the ones that come up on top, at least with regards to the Gunrunner pick. So looking at the map 5 or the 5 map set, it would be Hackney Hardpoint, Piccadilly S&D, Hackney Dom, Petro Hardpoint, and Gunrunner S&D map 5. And based on these map vetoes, it swings heavily in the Huntsman's favor. So if I were to guess what the map count would be, I think it's going to be another 3-1 for the fourth time in a row, and the Huntsman should come out on top. But what did you think of this series, Seth?
Yeah, I think that's a very good breakdown with the map vetoes, and I agree. I think Huntsman definitely have the art of favorites in terms of the respawns, and the S and Ds. Yeah, it's tough because do you play Arclov after you just won it in a very hype situation, or do you fall back on a gunrunner map you're much better on? We'll see what they pick.
Mm-hmm.
But I think either way, I agree with 3-1. Sounds pretty good to me. That S and D could swing the Ravens' way, or they could still respawn. But I do think the Huntsmen are stronger. The one area that is interesting for me to think about in this series is the idea of like I don't know about an X factor, but a player that needs to step up and has been stepping up on each team.
Mm-hmm.
So like for the Ravens, right? We always talked about if Shawnee could drop over a 1.0 in respawns, they can win a series. Like we kept saying that over and over again because it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Um, but now that it's happening, they're winning. So I think for the Ravens, try to get Shawnee comfortable, try to make sure he's playing like he was last weekend, and that gives them the best chance. And then on optics, wow, I was looking at a picture of Scump there and made me think of optics. But on the Huntsman side of things, I think people expect me to say for CD, but I'm actually going to go with Arcides. I think you're right. Dropping what was it, a
Yep,
0.91?
that's the set.
Yeah, that's just not good enough, man. You're Alec, you're Arceus. You're supposed to be one of the better players in the game, and it's chance time. You got to step up. You did it last year. You can do it again. I don't doubt, or I'm not like worried about his ability.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that in a series like this where it's going to be a bit slower, it's going to be a little AR heavy. You're going to have good ARs on the other side. He's going to be in a weird position. Where I think he individually needs to step up, and hopefully we see that. So yeah, for me, it's between Arcides and Arcides and Shawnee, and which player kind of steps up more.
Yeah, just one last note on the series. I think if London's going to have any opportunity to win, it's going to come down to that Dom or X Factor players.
Oh,
They're very poor Dom.
Dom,
They're
man.
a very poor Dom team. I do not expect them to take both hard points off the Huntsmen. So for
Yep.
me, it's going to come down to the Dom. If London win it, they have a chance. If they don't, then I don't think they'll stand, to win many maps in the series. But that's just my last take on that series.
Yeah, I shall also want to include if that MP5 nerf is real and they're not going to play on the pre-patch. I personally think it does favor the Ravens, so just keep an eye out for that. Well, who knows if that's going to play a pre-patch? I don't know. It's hard to say. They might play pre-patch. I hope they do.
Yeah.
But if they don't, Ravens might have a little bit of advantage there. But moving on ahead to the other series, this is just every time, man. It's always Dallas versus FaZe. It's happened 6 times before. And so we have the cop that never forgets versus Sick Joke in and out of game and Simp. Obviously, you see the 2 rings, the 1 ring, and both are chasing kind of like history. And I think for Simp, I think he'd be the what wins 2 in a row as a rookie, and then next year wins another one. That'd be pretty crazy. And for Kareem, he's still chasing Ogre2's record, so we'll see. I don't know if this will count towards that, but we'll see. And so this series, yeah, let me kind of give you guys an overview of what we've seen before with these teams. It's not looking good for the Empire. They've won it once, and FaZe has won it 5 times. It's pretty brutal. And I think that, there's been a lot of different meta changes. They play each other a lot over the years, so you can't really say it's been because of a certain player not being comfortable in a role. I think it's just been matchups, and I'll show you what I mean. So for Hardpoint here, we get rid of the one behind. And there we go. So for hardpoints here, I personally think it'll go down to a cave and a gunrunner. And so this is the problem that Yas mentioned a lot before with the Empire, where they were like 0-6 or 0-7 on cave, including a loss or 2 losses to FaZe in the past on cave map. But I actually think it'll get through because it's a gutsy call. But the Empire just beat Toronto on cave and looked pretty darn good doing it. And Toronto's a pretty good AR team. Like they have Cammy methods. Like they're pretty solid in that department. And if the Empire were to take them down on cave, it looks pretty good. And they're going to be feeling confident. If they could beat FaZe on a map that the Empire are usually not very good at, and FaZe does like, that'd be a really good way to start the series off. So I think that might get free. I'm sorry, they won't pick it, but they'll let it through. They're not going to ban it. And then FaZe will pick it, and they'll get like upset in map 1. That's kind of what I predict. And then Gunrunner will get through because between the two, they played it 4 times, and it's 3-1 in favor of FaZe. But I know, sorry, 3-1 in favor of Empire. So what I think will happen is, FaZe will ban Ramaza because they've actually never played Ramaza hardpoint. They're just not going to play it. It's just not going to happen. They're going to ban Ramaza. And then I think if you're the Empire, you ban Petro, and you let Cave get through, and then you play him on Gunrunner. And I think that favors the Empire because they've beaten FaZe 3 times on Gunrunner to FaZe's 1 win. And like I said before, if they showed it on Cave against Toronto, if they can do it against FaZe, that'd be great. So personally, I feel like these 2 maps will get through for Hardpoint, and I think Empire has a decent chance in both of them. So the Dom is where it gets tricky. This is kind of the swing for the series, in my opinion. This is really where it's going to come down. Big, really important map. And in the past, Dallas is only 1-5. Oh, sorry, 1-6. 1-6 against FaZe and Doms. That's not great. Like that's really, really bad. 16.67% win rate in Dom against FaZe. It's pretty poor. And they tried at different maps. They're 0-1 against FaZe on Petro, and they're 0-3 on Gunrunner. And Hackney, they're 1-1. And so it's hard to pick the map. And I think Gunrunner could get through again. But I think New York's done losing to FaZe on Gunrunner. It's been 3 times now. They haven't found success against FaZe on that map. So I think they'll ban Gunrunner. And I don't think FaZe wants to play Petro, especially not against the Empire. I recall some maps that the Empire played on Petro Dom where Illy just seems to have a really good read on that map and mode and seems to control the pace of it very well. And if I'm FaZe, I'm not going to pick Petro because it can swing very quickly with those trip caps and get people spawning P1. So if I'm FaZe, I'm picking Hackney. Hackney's chaotic. It's a place where you can get your SMGs down and dirty and get them going. And I think we'll see a really fun SMG battle on Hackney. I really hope it's Hackney. And we'll see some wild, wacky spawns because, of course, we will. And, I think this one, it's hard to call, but I'm going to call it in FaZe's favor. Like I said before, they've won 5 times in Dom, and Empire's won 1 in their matchup. So I have FaZe taking the Dom. Now, Search, again, it gets tricky because, once again, the Empire have not done too well against FaZe in the Searches. They are 2 versus 6 in the Search category. And the only 2 wins they had was on Ramaza S&D, which they've only played once, and then Piccadilly, which they lost twice against FaZe. So what I think will happen is they haven't played a zero cave once in this matchup. I don't think it'll get through again, so that's gonna get banned. And then I think someone's gonna ban Ramaza. I'm not sure which person player. I think it'd be Empire that bans Ramaza. FaZe will ban Peak, and then Piccadilly and Gunner gets through. This is an interesting map set for Search because the Piccadilly one for me, I think Empire picks, and I think they pick it because the last time they played it, I believe it was Krim was trying to snipe at the time, or maybe Clay. It wasn't Illy, basically. So they switched things up since then. They now have Illy running the sniper in S&D, and it looks a lot better. I don't know why they even thought about putting Krim on the sniper. It's pretty dumb in my opinion. And you have Illy, he's a prodigy S&D player. You're not going to put him on the sniper. So I think that'll be a big impact for them. And FaZe feels comfortable in Piccadilly. They're not going to ban it. So I think Piccadilly gets through because Dallas picks it. And then Gunrunner gets through, and it's so far 0-2 for Empire against FaZe on this map. So I think FaZe will feel comfortable picking Gunrunner, which to me means that it's kind of split. I think Empire could take Piccadilly and FaZe could take Gunrunner. And so this is definitely going to map 5, in my opinion. Like, last time these two teams played, it was actually a... I don't want to say... It was a 3-0 for FaZe. I was going to say Swift, but it really wasn't. I mean, FaZe took Gunrunner 250 to 219 in hardpoint. S&D was 6-5. The domination was 160 to 155. So it was very, 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 very close game. 5 games, or 3 games. Probably the closest 3-0 you're going to see. And this time I expected to go the distance. And based on the map breakdown, I do think Dallas takes this 3-2 in the map 5 on Piccadilly. I think it'll be definitely risky, and it's not going to be, comfortable. It's going to be really close. I expect it to be really close. The only reason why I give the edge to Dallas is because of preparation and practice. I feel like they're taking time to really, get comfortable on different maps, like we saw against Toronto, picking Cave and beating them on it. And that Toronto series was hairy. They did lose 2 maps. They lost on Petro S&D 6-4. I don't think that'll get through for this series. And then the Gunrunner they lost on Domination, which is again why I don't think they're going to pick Gunrunner Dom. They're much more comfortable in Hackney, so I expect Hackney to get through. But yeah, like I was saying, I just feel like Empire focus on the maps they were weak at and try to widen their pool, expecting to be in the grand final, having to play that 9 map set. And then for FaZe, I feel like it doesn't really matter what map they play on. They're going to play it the way they always do, which is hyper aggressive and not always the right way to play. But come this far down the year, if the Empire have a better grasp on the game and know the right way to play, especially in S&D, and don't only rely on mid-round adjustments, I do think they'll be able to edge it out, especially in Piccadilly. Because Piccadilly is a map where I feel like it's one of the hardest to make mid-round adjustments on because of all the angles. It's hard to call something you haven't really worked on and practiced that much because you're going to be running into angles you are just really tough to get yourself out of. So for that reason, I've Empired 3-2 on Piccadilly. So what do you think of that breakdown, Yes?
Yeah, I think you explained it very well. Obviously, this is a series that sways heavily in FaZe's favor, given past series. And obviously, looking at their most recent matchup, that was a 3-0. Obviously close, but again, Dallas, I think they have their work cut out for them. One thing that they've always done well is been good with their map vetoes, and I think you're correct in saying that if they get these specific maps, that they'll definitely have the advantage. I think for me, an X Factor player, you need to look at his Clay. Historically, he's struggled in this matchup against the Tiny Terrors. And I think if they're gonna if Dallas is gonna have a chance, they need Clay to be playing like he was against the Ultra, which I mean, for the Empire fans, I can only hope he does so. I think it's so hard to tell with these two teams. I know you give the edge to Dallas. Personally, I do think FaZe might come out ahead in this one. Although I do agree, I think it might go map 5. But either way, it's going to be a close series. Two teams have been the top 2 all year, and rightfully so. They're in the winners finals.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I have a feeling like they got 3-0, but it was close, and they're feeling confident beating Toronto. The thing is, so here's an interesting talking point, right? So both teams were first and second seed, and to play one match to make it on, and both of them went to a map 5, and it looked ropey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question for you is in that scenario when maybe you felt super confident going in and you get knocked against like two maps. Obviously, I do believe the Huntsmen are a better team than Toronto, so that might be a little more scary for
Yeah.
FaZe. I mean, for I guess for Empire. But so what do you think their mindset is? Do you think it's because I personally expected them to maybe think it was could be a little easier than that, and maybe they got a little scared. So what do you think their mindset is going into this match? Is it going to be like more tuned in and kind of more focused, or does it not make a difference because it's champs?
I think for Dallas or for FaZe?
I think for both.
I think for FaZe, I think what they need to focus on mindset wise is this is a team you've beaten multiple times before. You know you're capable of
Yep.
it. Just focus on playing the game that you've been playing. Continue to outslay them. Continue to put that pressure on every map, and you'll be fine. For Dallas, I think the way you got to look at it is reset. It's been a month since you last played. You have beaten this team once before, so it is possible to beat this team in a grand finals or a winners finals rather. For them, I think you got to recognize that the pressure's on FaZe to win. They're the team that I think are the favorites necessarily, especially being that first seed. But again, a lot has changed. I'd assume that they've made a lot of improvements in their S&D, as is FaZe. But I expect Dallas to be the one that I think ends up being the difference. And as you mentioned, they've been so poor in S&D and Dom against FaZe before. Surely they've gone back through all those matches and looked through what they can do to improve, and that might be the difference. I'm still going to lean towards FaZe, but again, it's so hard to
Yep.
call.
Yeah, it's definitely the hardest to call. If it goes to a nine maps between those two teams, it's almost like impossible to
Yeah,
call because every map they play is always so damn close.
I I,
It's just going to be
I
so
can't wait
tough.
to see it, man. This is going to be so entertaining.
So what would you rather see though? Would you rather see the Empire FaZe Grand Final, or would you
Ooh.
rather see the Huntsman FaZe Grand
Who
Final?
would I rather see? I
Yeah.
think poetically, it'd be amazing to hear like Dallas and Chicago is the way we started it. Dallas and Chicago's
Yep.
got to be the way we end it. Like just think, it's a Crim versus
Yeah.
Scump, all the trash talk, all the
Yep.
nonsense leading up to this one moment. Krim has the opportunity to get 3 rings, get on par with Damon. Obviously, not the same circumstances, so I wonder if they'll even count that. But it'd be pretty.
Oh, Krim's counting it.
Although, although I think FaZe will be the ones in grand finals. Um, what I want to see is Dallas and Chicago.
Yeah, the heart wants Dallas and Chicago, but the brain thinks
Yep.
Vegas. um, yeah, I mean it'd be great to see a Cinderella story for London, but yeah, we're not
It looks
a little
so bleak.
concerned.
I think their best chance was if the weekend continued and they stay on that hot streak. I think having this extra week off for teams to analyze what they've done
Yeah, that's
might
true.
hurt them. But you never know.
Might. Yeah, but that kind of wraps up the podcast for this episode of the podcast. Just kind of broke down what we expect to see in the upcoming matches. It's good. Obviously, who knows how map videos are going to go. We did our best to predict them. I think we did a pretty good job. But it's champs. Anything can happen. Someone could pick a really random map out of nowhere. Like that's how I felt when Empire picked Cave against Toronto. Like, what the hell? Or didn't ban Cave against Toronto. But if they do that again, it'll be interesting. Also, credits to Easy Mac because a lot of our stats came from
Mhm.
him. So big up Easy Mac. So do you want anything else to say before we end it?
No, I think you summed it pretty well. Obviously, this is our last podcast for this CDL season. The next one will probably be after we find out who the champs are. So you guys in the comments below, or just let us know, tweet at us who you think are gonna win, and who you think is gonna be in the finals.
Yeah, and also at the end of this, because it's our last podcast of the season, we're thinking about doing podcasts after this where we kind of break down each individual team's year. So stay on the lookout for that and let us know if I think it's a good idea or not. I think it'll be fun, kind of to recount the year from each team's perspective. So keep tuned for that. But yeah, that's all from us. So see you guys next time.
See you.